Now, for Daf Hey, we'll have to go back to the Mishnah about Nazir Olam. So let's see if we can get the Mishnah here on Daf Daladom and Aleph. Ma bein Nazir Olam le Nazir Shimshon. Right, so the Mishnah says that there's something called a Nazir Olam, and he says Hareini Nazir Olam, and then there's Nazir Shimshon, and he also is going to be a Nazir for his entire life. But Nazir Olam Hichbid Sioro Mekil B'tar. He can be Mekil, and if, let's say, his hair is very heavy on him, so he's allowed to cut off a small amount of his hair. He can't cut it off entirely. And he has to bring Sholosh Behemos. The day on which he, I guess, cuts off part of his hair, he brings a keves, a kivsa, and an ayil. And if he becomes tamei, he brings a carbon too. Okay, so let's take a look at the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Beis, and we'll see 3 lines up from the bottom. Nazir Olam Hecha Ksiv. Okay, so we want to know where we find this kula. Where's the source for this leniency that applies to a Nazir Olam? That I got something stuck in my throat. I'm sorry. That if something is too heavy for him, he's allowed to cut off part of his hair. Where do we find such a thing? The Salya, we went to the Brisa of Rebbe Omer, Avshalom Nazir Olam. How do we know that Avshalom was a Nazir Olam? Shenemar, it says in Shmuel Beis Pasuk Tesvav, Vayimi Keitz Arba'im Shana, Vayomer Avshalom El HaMelech, Elcha Na Vashalem Es Nidri Asher Nadarti Lashem Bechevron. Now, it says here Nidri, and we have a principle that Stam Loshen Neder, the Gemara thinks, is a reference to the Karbanos of Nazir. This was a Kabbalah that Chazal had, that this neder in this pasuk of Avshalom is the neder of Nazirus, and it was a Nazirus Olam. So we derive from this pasuk that Avshalom was a Nazir Olam. Okay, we don't know, when he's allowed to be Megaleach. So on that, we have in this brisa a machlokas that's recorded between Rebbe and the Chachamim. First, we learn the Shita of Rebbe. Rebbe says, "Umegaleach echad l'shnei masar chodesh." Once a year, Avshalom would cut his hair. How do we know that? How does Rebbe know that? Shenemar, it says, and this is in the same. No, this is actually a little bit earlier in the parsha. And it says there, I'll read a few words that are not printed in Gemara. Ubegalchos rosho, v'yomi kates, yomim la yomim. And then it says, Asher yigaleach ki kaved olav begilcho. So we're going to try to figure out that yomim li yomim, that phrase, is a reference to 12 months. And here we start that phase. The Yoliv, how do we know what Yomim means? And Rebbe has Xer Shalom. Yomim, it says in Avshalom, and Yomim, it says in Bote Orich Choma. Right, the Torah tells us at the end of Sefer Vayikra that if a person sells a bias in a walled city, then we give him up to 12 months to be goel his sada. The mocher could buy back his sada from the Lokeach, whether the Lokeach agrees or not. And the pasuk says, we'll read the pasuk, Ishki Yimkar Bayis Beis Moshav Ir Choma V'Haisa Gulaso Atom Shnas Mimkaro, and then the Torah adds the word Yomim Tia Gulaso. So it says B'Tom Shnas Mimkaro is Ma'hasam Shnei Masar Chodesh. At the end of the year, it's 12 months later since the date of the Mechira. And the Mocher could redeem his field, give back the money, and get back his field. Afkan here, B'Av Shalom, the same thing applies, that after Yomim, which means 12 months, he was Megalech his Seyar. L'shnei Basar Chodesh. So this is the opinion of Rebbe, and now we get to the second and third opinions here in the Brisa. Rebbe Norai Omer, Megaleach Achas L'Shloshen Yom. Once in 30 days. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Megaleach, May Erev Shabbos Erev Shabbos. Every week on Friday he could cut his hair. Shekein Motzinu, Bivnei Malachim. This was the minhag of the princes. Shemegalchim, May Erev Shabbos, Li Erev Shabbos. And Avshalom was makil by removing some of the hair off his head from time to time. And since Avshalom was a Nazir Olam, we derive from this that you can be makil and cut your hair mizman luzman, whether it's 12 months according to Rebbe, whether it's 1 month according to Reb Norai, or whether it's every week from Erev Shabbos to every Shabbos according to Reb Yosef. Now we're going to derive from Avshalom and his tiglachas for every Nazir Olam, according to Rebbe, as we said before, once every 12 months, etc., etc. Now, in Hilchas Nazirus, Per Gimel, the Rambam Paskins, like Rebbe, deriving from Avshalom, that the Nazir Olam is allowed to be Galech once every 12 months. However, there is on Masechet Nazir, like on the Durham, a Mefaresh, and he says that the heter of Tiglachas depends, and it's relative to the weight of the hair. And Avshalom was a Baal Koach. I guess he was a strong person, a big person, and Gilech Rak Pam B'Yud Beis Chodesh. He didn't have to cut his hair off that frequently. You know, a strong person could carry on his head, I guess, a full weight of hair. But a general Nazir Olam, we paskin like Reb Yossi, could be Megaleach once in 30 days. My time of the Rebbe. Why does Rebbe insist that Avshalom would be Megaleach once a year? Yolif Zer Shava, as we saw earlier, Mibate Arichoma. For Rebbe Hudi Omar, Ein Yomim Pchusim Mishnayim. What does this mean? So first of all, we should know that this statement of Rebbe appears on Daf Lamed Aleph in Masechet Erchin, as you'll see here quoted in the Mesoras HaShas. And Rebbe himself says, with regard to Gulas Bate Arichoma, that when the pasuk says Yomim Tia Gulaso, it means the Mocher does not have rights to redeem his field or his house on the very day he sold it. And Yomim means 2 days. And that sets up the minimum amount of time before which he cannot begol his sod or his bias. So if that be the case, the word Yomim, according to Rebbe, is interpreted to mean 2 days, 48 hours. So now we have a problem because from this Kseres Shava, Rebbe drew the conclusion that Yomim in Avshalom's cases was once a year. We should derive the conclusion that every 2 days that passed by, Avshalom would take a haircut. And the Gemara says, "Hai gzeira shava mishum koved gamir, uveshnei yamim leka koved." What we're deriving from Bati Arechoma is not a giluach of 2 days, but rather the kula here to allow giluach is based on koved, not the koved that we're suffering from today, but the koved of the heavy hair on top of his head. And the pasuk itself in Avshalom says, "Ki kaved alav v'gilcho." It's impossible, therefore, for 2 days to be enough of a time period in which there's kaved alav v'gilcho. The kaved is gamir, and therefore we didn't accept Gzeira Shava to imply that every 2 days the Nazir Olam could cut his hair. But rather, the word Yomim in the context of a Nazir Olam is to be interpreted as what? As a year. So the Gemara asks me, okay, it says Yomim in the plural, and Avshalom was Megaleach, maybe in the plural of years, meaning after 2 years. And the Gemara supports this position by saying that Siv, we find in the case of the dream of Paro in Bereshis Memalch, it says, "Vayhimi Kate Shnatayim Yomim." So we see that there's a period called Yamim, which refers to 2 years. So we already have a precedent in the Torah itself. Now, I'm not sure, but I think what the Gemara is suggesting here, which is a pella to me, is that maybe we drop the ball on the Gzeira Shava to Ge'ulas Bati Archoma and plug it instead a Gzeira Shava to Paro's dream. But the only problem is, and that's why I shy away from this, is because a Gzeira Shava requires a Kabbalah, ish mipi ish, that takes us all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So would the Gemara have raised the question that maybe this Gzeira Shava from this pasuk? That seems impossible, because you can't just come up with a pasuk and say, okay, we'll compare it to this. Either there was a Kabbalah or there wasn't. In any event, the Gemara offers the following answer: why we're not going to compare Shanim here in Avshalom's Nazir Olam to the Shanim of Paro's dream. Danim Yomim she'eni ma'im Shanim, the Yomim she'eni ma'im Shanim. Right. So it means it's more logical to take the Yomim of Avshalom and derive it from the Yomim of Bati Arechoma, because in both cases the Torah used the word Yomim and only the word Yomim. But we're not going to prove anything from Paro's dream where it says Shnatayim Yomim, and Shnatayim means 2 years. So the Torah adds 2 years to indicate that this is not the regular Yomim, but rather 2 years worth of Yomim. So we're not going to derive any conclusions from the Yomim, which is called Shnatayim Yomim, but rather the Yomim of Avshalom, where it doesn't mention any word about Shanim, is going to be compared to the Gulas Bati Arechom. So the Gemara asking the Ema Shloshim Yom. Maybe Yomim, in regard to Avshalom, means that every 30 days he would cut his hair, and that's based on Gzeira Shava of Yomim in the parsha of Misonanim. What does it say in Misonanim? The Ksiv in Bamidbar Perkid Aleph, it says Ad Chodesh Yomim. So we see that Yomim means a Chodesh. And once again, the Gemara is going to give the same answer. Done in Yomim she'eni moim chadoshim, Yomim she'eni moim chadoshim. Ve'al yochiach zeh she'esh imo chadoshim. Here, the Torah went out of its way to tell you that the Yomim is chadoshim. And that means Ad Chodesh Yomim in the parasha of the Masonim. V'ema mehacha miyamim yomima. The pasuk should be compared to Yomima, and this is in the parasha of Bas Yiftach, in Shoftim, Perek Yud Aleph. So in the case of Bas Yiftach, she would, at the end of every 3-month period of time, she would go Kol Shlosha Chadashim. Not sure exactly where she went. 1 second. Do you have any sort of commentary there, by chance?
No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it on the computer. I don't have it in English.
I'm just trying to figure out, in the case of Bas Yiftach, maybe Rashi says something here that I missed. Is there any Rashi here? Do you see any Rashi?
I don't think so. 1 second.
We'd have to open up maybe the Tanakh, we hope. The trouble is we don't really have any Rashi, we just have them a farish.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit difficult to work with. All right, we'll leave it out for a second.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, we'd have to look it up in Tanakh, I think. In any event, maybe Avshalom was Mekil Vesara once every 3 months. And our answer is Danim Yomim Mi Yomim. He ain't Danim Yomim Mi Yomima. So Xer Show has to be exactly the same word. And it says the same word identically, Yomim in Avshalom and Yomim Bate Arichoma, but in the parsha of Bas Yiftach, it says Yomima. So that's not enough for Xer Show. Oh, so in terms of that question that we had before, he says here in a note, which I didn't realize he had this note, that in the story of Yiftach, before he went out to fight a battle against Ammon, he took a neder that if Hashem delivers the Bnei Ammon into his hands, then the first person to walk out of this deles, or I shouldn't say the first person, but the first animated being that walks out of this deles, Likrossi, meaning to welcome me, so to speak, when I come back to Shalom from Bnei Ammon, V'hoyel Hashem v'aleisiu olam, be a korban olam.
Right.
So he was makabel that the first animal that would pop out of the door would become a korban olam.
That didn't go well.
No, that didn't go well because, as it turns out, his daughter popped out her head. Okay, let's just see. He tells you what this 3-month period is. Oh, so the pasuk says, see, the pasuk we're looking at is Shoftim Perkei Al pasuk Mem, and it says, Miyomim Yomima Telechna Benos Yisrael. I can't read the next word here. Miyomim Yomima Telechna Benos Yisrael. The Tanos, I don't know, maybe Tanos is the name of a place. The Bas Yiftach Hagil Odi, Arba Yomim B'Shana. I guess she was very popular, this girl, Bas Yiftach. So a lot of her friends would come to a certain place and they would spend 4 days with her. how often they
No.
come. It seems like they would come every 3 months. That's the impression I get. Now the Gemara asks, "Umay nafka mina." Why do you say that the difference between Yomim and Yomim is enough to be ma'akev, to undermine the possibility of Xeris Shavua, Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel? And here we're getting into the parish of Nigei Batim. And we have a case of a Nega Sheposa, Li'achar Shavua Rishon Shel Hezger Bayis. And what happens is that the Kohen does what's called a Hezger on the Bayis. And it says, V'shav HaKohen Vayom HaShvi V'ra'av Hinei Posa HaNega V'kiras HaBayis. So if it was low Posa Nega, the Nega didn't diminish in any way after the first week of Hezger, then there's another week of Hezger. And if in the second one second, let me get a chumash. It says here, Vayikra Yudalid Pasuk Lamed Tes. You have a chumash? Vayikra Yudalid. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Maki Savo al Eretz Canaan Asher Niyosem Lechem Lachuz V'Nosan Nega Tzoras the base Achuzastem Eretz Achuzastem Uvolo Asher Lo Lebayis Yigid Kohen Keneged Nir Li B'Bayit Tziva Kohen Ufinu Es Abayis V'Terem Yovo Kohen Liros Sanega V'Lo Yitma Kol Asher B'Bayis Tachkein Yovo Kohen. Okay, so this is the first Re'iyah. Ros HaNega Minei Nega B'Kiras Habayis Yotza Kohen Min Habayis Al Pesach Habayis V'Hiskir Es Habayis Shivas Yom. So this is the first round of Hezger. But I guess the importance for us is that it says Shivas Yom. So Yomim is Xer Shavan, it should be number 7 days. This is Pasuk Lamed Ches. Now he comes, the Kohen comes back. I guess it means a week later. This is already the second Hezger. And then Posa Nega. So he sees that the Nega is spreading, V'tziva Kohen V'chiltzas Avonim, and then they have to do Netitza on the Avonim. V'shlichu es hem michutzlam le'ir el mokum tomeh. V'sabayis yaktzia mibayis sovi. All right. Okay, so what is Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel? The Shava Koi B'Yom HaShvi V'Rav Yinei Posa Nega B'Kiras Habayis. Okay. So we're talking about the second week after the first week of Hezger. And what do we see? Ubahem. And during the course of the second week, Posa Nega, Uba Kohen Vogidi Posa Nega. One second, that's Posuk Mem Dalet, it says here. Is that what we read here? One second. Oh, I see what's going on. In Pasuk Lamites, after he did the Hezger, and then a week went by and Pasuk Nega. And then it says in Pasuk Mem Gimel in Yoshev HaNega, and the Nega came back again. So what are we learning here? Now we have Xera Shava. What's Xera Shava? Zui Shiva Zui Bia. We're going to make an equation and the dinim are going to be the same. In other words, if let's say in the first week, after having checked, let's say on a Sunday, he checks the nega, the Kohen, and then he comes back a week later and after the first week of Hezger, and the nega basically looks exactly like it did a week ago. But now there's a second week of Hezger, and now the nega is spreading. So what's Zui Shiva Zui Bia? What are we equating here? We're equating the situation of a bias that after the first week, everything remains status quo. So during the course of the first week, it remains status quo. And only in the second week, the nega spread. And we're going to equate that with the case of nega shepasalach hashvua rishon. So again, the first case is where the pasha nega was in the second week, and we're going to compare that to the case of pasha hanega after the first week, not a week later. And you again, I guess the Havmina was, since in the first week, at the end of the first week, we didn't see any, how should I say, decline in the situation. We didn't see it get worse. And it was only Shavua Sheni. I don't know how Chamer the Torah would say, but we're going to equate it with this Zera Shava to the case where it was very severe, and even immediately after the first week, the nega was pasa, and therefore the same din of choletzes avonim akalechas atiyah, maybe avonim acheres v'tochas abayis maskiro. The same dinim apply. Now here, what's the Xera Shava? It's between Uba Kohen and Vishava Kohen. So we see that you can have differences in language and yet derive a Xera Shava. That's what we see from Rabbi Shmuel. So your answer about the fact that in the case of Bas Yiftach, it only says Yomima but not Yomim, and that breaks up the Xera Shava, that's not correct. When it says Hani Mili, when do we accept and validate Xera Shava even if the words are not the same? There's no other candidate, there's no other word that's similar. In other words, here where we have the word yamin, right? Let's see, what was the word? It said in Geulas Bate Arichama, what was the language? Achnas, Atom Shnas Mimkar Yomim. And that word Yomim is identical with the word Yomim in the parsha of Avshalom in Nazir. But here it says Yomima in the parsha Bas Yiftach. So that's that's not where we're going to take this Gzeira Shava. We'd rather take the Gzeira to similar words. Ika the Amri, the Gemara now gives a different answer as to why we don't derive conclusions from Yomima. Mino Yadina the Kol Tlosa Yarchin Chad Zimna. Dilmar Boz Zimni B'Shata. How do we know that we divide up the year into 4 equal parts? Each one is 3 months. That's when they would go to the Benos. That's when the Benos Yisrael would go to Bas Yifta. Maybe they went 4 times to the year. Just 1 second. Did I mess up here? Mm-hmm. 4 times 3 is 12. Film Arba Zimni B'Shata. In other words, you're dividing it up into equal parts. Doesn't necessarily have to be equal parts. It could be Arba Yarchin Chad Zimna. Maybe one time they went after 4 months. Who trained Yarchin B'Chad Zimna. And another time they only went 2 months. So there's only a 2-month period between one halicha and another halicha. Klomar, shaholchu lekone b'sof arba chadashim li'achar shmona chadashim. Li'achar asor chadashim b'sof hashon. So again, you can separate one halicha from the other with shorter or longer periods of time. There's many, many different options. In other words, the Torah doesn't tell you how often they went. So therefore, we can't learn from Yomima, but rather we learn from Yomi. Rabbi Nahora Omer Megaleach Achas L'Shloshim Yom. My timer. Where does he come up with 30 days? The Gabi Kohanim. The Kohanim who are enjoined from growing their hair long, they have to take a haircut within a 30-month period of time. Mishum de'ika COVID. Because after 30 days, if they don't take a haircut, the hair is weighing down heavily on it.
Right.
So HaKadosh Baruch Hu apparently wants the Kohanim to look presentable. And from the Kohanim, Rabbi Roy is going to drive the conclusion that after 30 days, the hair gets very heavy, and that's why the Nazir Olam, in this case, Avshalom, would be Megalech Esara. Because the Pasuk, as we saw before, says, Kaved Alav Vigilcha. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Megalech me Erev Shabbos Erev Shabbos, and that we said was the given practice amongst the Bnei Malachim, the princes. So the Gemara says, "My ika beinei l'shar achoi." He says here, I know you have to leave soon, so we'll try to make it fast here. He says, "V'meh hoisa nikeres niziruso shalav shalom kapishar echov af shalo hayu nizirim begilchu kamo." The Gemara is asked, there must be some sort of kiyum of a Nazir growing his hair. And it's got to be obvious and apparent that he's growing his hair. If you're going to tell me he's going to cut his hair every week, like the Bnei Malachim, then he's taking a haircut more frequently than anybody else. So that's not going to be a heker that he's a Nazir. And the Gemara answers, Yom Tov Shechal Lios B'emtza Shabbos Da'achoi Megalchin V'hu Lo Megalech. There'll be an obvious manifestation of his Nazirus in the case where Yontif falls in the middle of a week. His brothers are taking a haircut on Erev Yontif, but Hu Lo Megalech. He's not going to cut off his hair until Friday. Inami, another difference is that Avshalom is Legluche Min Safra Timali Shabsa. He'll take his haircut already with daybreak on Friday, whereas Achoi Megalchim, just 1 second. Oh, I'm sorry. So Legaluche Min Safra Timali Shabbos. The issue here is when on Friday was the haircut taken? Achoi Megalchim, they would already cut their hair Safra in the morning. Iu, but Avshalom would not be cutting his hair until the evening. Okay, we're going to have to try to figure out, I guess L'Koved Shabbos, you could already cut your hair Friday in the morning, but since in the case of Avshalom it was a special heter, it was like a dechia because the hair was heavy, so we'd rather delay it until the last minute, which means right before Shabbos. So the Rosh and the Meiri say, "Ein kavanas haGemara lomar shav sholem lo gileach ad somoch l'chisa Shabbos, el she'echav yochlu legaleach miyad b'boker v'hu lo gileach ad achar she'hevi karbonosov." But first he has to bring his karbonos, and that's going to delay his haircut until sometime in the afternoon on Erev Shabbos. The Gemara now goes back to the pasuk by Avshalom, and it says, "Hani arboim shana." The Torah, the Tanakh says, "Vayihimi kates arboim shana vayomer Avshalom." It said, "Shemaya v'nitayu." What was going on? They were counting 40 years, and at the end of those 40 years, Avshalom went to pay up his neder. And the Gemara doesn't want to accept that the 40 years is the 40 years of Malchus David, because although the Malchus of David was 40 years, but after the merit of Avshalom, David only reigned an extra 5 years. Shalosh Shnos Harav, and Shana Nosefah Shepoket Es Yisrael, v'Shana Nosefah Shehemed Mishmeres Kohanim Uleviim Shezocha B'Goren Arona. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Nehorai Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua L'Kates Arboim Shana Sheshalu Lahem Melech. They came to, people of Israel came to Shmuel HaNavi to ask that he appoint a king. And the Gemara says that we can prove that the Ma'aseh of Avshalom was in the 40th year from the time that the people came to request a Mini Melech. The Taina Osa Shana Sheshalu LeMelech He Shnas Eser L'Shmuel HaRamasi. So on the 10th year that Shmuel HaRamasi was the Shofet of Israel, that's the first year of the calculation of the Arboim Shana. So Shol HaMelech in the middle of the 11th year of Shmuel, Nimshecha Malchuso Shnatayim V'Chetzi. And then David reigned as king for 36 years. Avshalom rose in rebellion at the beginning of the 36th year of the Malchus of David, which is the 40th year from the time that they asked for a melech. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Daf Hey. The Mishnah establishes that Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. You want to ask me Nani Bili? Amar of Masna, we have a Kabbalah that Stam Nazir is Shloshim Yom, and a Smach is Amar Kra in the Parsha of Nazir. In Noso, it says Kadosh Yeh, and Yeh B'Gematria Tval Sinhav. And Yeh is 30. Bar Pada Amar, Stam Naziris is 29 days, Keneged Nazir Nizro Hamura B'Torah. Shloshim Chaser Achas. So Nazir and Nizro appear 29 times. The Stam Naziris is Esrim V'Teisha Yom. So the Gemara says, my time, Rav Masna Nami, why didn't Rav Masna, who took year as a smach that Naziris is Shloshim Yom, Melech Minozim Nizro, why didn't he derive it as Bar Pada did from Nazir Nizro? Omalacha, Rav Masna would answer, who, some of those Lashonos of Naziris in the parasha that you're calculating 29 times, they were written for other reasons, not in order to count up to the number 29, which Rasha, we learn and derive Dinei Naziris from these psukim. For example, from the Pasuk Miyayin V'Shecher Yazir, we're going to darshan Lesar Yayin Mitzvah Ki Yayin Rishus. Sheneser Gam B'Yayin Shem Nitzuva L'Shtoso Machma Shvua. So he took a shvur to drink wine, but it's usher as a Nazir to override Naziris for the sake of the shvur. Another pasuk. Ki pole, ki yafle, lindar neder nazir lahazir, malamich ha-nazirus chala al nazirus. If he says already nazir ayom, and then again he says already nazir ayom, there's going to be a chalos of 2 Nazirus. So me'achar shem nidmixas l'shonos ha-Nazirus shebe parasha tzorch lidrosh dini Nazirus shuv lo matzinu esrim v'teisha l'shonos Nazir l'lamed al minyin mezir. So again, we need a number of the places in the Torah which says Nazir, and therefore we can't calculate them, how many times to say the word Nazir to teach us the Stam Nazirus of Esrim V'Teisha Yom.